slightly delayed June 1st Budget and Facilities Committee meeting, or actually June 1st Budget and Facilities Work Session. We have a couple of items on the agenda for today that we will discuss. I think the rest of the board will filter in as we start. I apologize for the delay. The board was in a meeting just prior to this that ended up running over, and so we are a few minutes late. I'm going to actually just kick this over to Mary to get started with the first agenda item.
Well, the item that we had on the agenda was facilities rates. And unfortunately, Mr. Ostano is not in the district to speak to this. But if we go back to 2018-19, when the rates were the same as they are now, we did have about $310,000 in revenue. And of that, about a third came from the separate lease that we have with the Japanese school. Other than that, I am not sure exactly what the board really is concerned about. As you know, it is on the reorg agenda that these rates are authorized, and we do have a resident rate and a non-resident rate.
Mary, when we discussed the rates the last time, when we were looking at this, I believe it was probably 2018, 2019, going into 2019, 2020. We had discussed making sure that we had gradual increases built in so that we never had to do larger increases. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to bring this to the board before I was gone, because it's something I didn't want to lose sight of. Because what's happened over the course of the years of us having these rates is that when we need, we would go years and years at the same level, and then we would hit organizations with a large increase all at once. And so the conversation is twofold. First, the concern that there might be additional costs, for example, for us to have the Japanese school if we're using any more additional custodial staff, which obviously Jim's not here to answer. But the other reason that I wanted to bring this to the board while I was still sitting here is that I wanted to see what the sense of the board was as far as moving forward with a potential increase, potential small increase, so that as we move forward and our costs, clearly we have costs associated with this, and our costs went up, we would be increasing the facilities use costs as we increased our own costs. And also just being mindful that it's certainly easier for these organizations to also build in slow increases if they need to increase to their, parent or customer base, that, their constituent base, their customer base, whatever it may be. So that was something that I know Dave Kirpin had brought to us. And I think we all agreed that it was important to keep sort of an eye on that, because I remember a few years ago, we would go to this sort of larger increase, and many of these nonprofit organizations came back and said it made it very difficult for them to recoup the costs because they did not want to pass along a large increase one year to the next to their families. So, Mary, is this jogging your memory a little bit as to some of the conversations that we had had?
Yes. And again, it is the July reorg that you would do that. I do not believe, well, I know that last year we did not increase the rates, certainly. And the year before we probably had not. So these, I would think, are the 18-19 rates that are still in effect.
Does any of the board members have anything to add, because or any questions or any conversation that they would like to add? Go ahead, Julie.
Can you just enlighten us, I guess, because I don't recall what the increase has been in the past, like our most recent increase percentage wise, and also what our rates are at this time?
I can't tell you what the last increase was because I don't have a file that written down. We have different rates, as I said, for resident and non-resident, and each room has a different rate based on its space. Plus, there is a custodial fee for an hourly rate, beginning with the lobby of a building at $55 an hour, the auditorium 110, the band room 55, cafeteria and choral room, they're each 55.
You don't have to go through them
Go
all.
through all of them, Mary. It's okay. I thought it was something that would be easier to just have out. I can have that. I can look at that on my own, so that's not a
Right.
problem. Thank you.
So
Was
again,
that not forwarded to you as committee people? I had asked that you receive that in advance of the meeting.
If it was, I apologize. I did not see it in advance.
Okay, okay.
that said, something to me like the custodial fee, I mean, that cost to us goes up every year, right? So our hourly cost goes up every year, and we certainly can't afford to subsidize that cost. So that is the board in agreement with me that we need to have sort of some reflection and review of this before the July reorg meeting, so that again, the conversation was the last time I remember when we went to do these increases, organizations like PYA and some other organizations came and said we made it very difficult for them because those increases came in sort of one fell like big number, as opposed to, and the number was the same for 8 years, however many years it was. So I'm just going with my feeling that I kind of wanted to make sure the ball didn't get dropped on this, to look at smaller numbers. So does anybody, Deb, Larry, Emily?
I agree that we should be looking at this. And if there are increases in if our custodial fees are increasing, then I think we should have that reflected in our facility use fees moving forward. So whatever we need to do to look at that and determine what that increase should be, then I think we should definitely take that action moving forward.
I agree.
Okay,
Deborah, Larry?
Thank you. I agree. It shouldn't be a money loser for us. And as the years go on, we should at least make the same proportionate amount of money and not make less money as we go along. Thank you for asking.
Okay. So Mary, maybe you can put together, from maybe just sort of backtrack to the date that we started with these fees and put together what our costs were starting then, and just it doesn't have to be, I mean, nothing here has to be like a precise number, but just to make sure that we're sort of staying with as we said, like a percentage that keeps us even. Because again, I just think if we wait years and years, then A, we have now incurred costs to do this, and B, the community organizations get hit with a much bigger number. So we had another question from a board member about daily construction bid. I know. What's that, Larry?
Can you hear me, or?
Yep,
am
I can
dead?
hear you.
Okay. I just put it in the chat. I think it may be worthwhile we know that our costs go up by, approximately X% a year. We might want to say over the next 3 years or over the next 5 years, it is our intention to increase the fees by 1% a year over that period of time. Granted, it's not binding and that can change in any way, but at least it gives the organizations notice, and it gives the community notice of our intent to remain revenue neutral in these rents. And it could be, one rate for residents increase, another rate for non-resident increase, however you guys want to do it. But there should be sort of be a 5-year plan for it, I think.
Agreed. Sorry.
And that's something.
I think that's what,
work on.
I know. And we had talked about that, a few years ago with Dave Kirpin, I think at the beginning of that year when he was on the his first year on the budget committee. And I think we had all agreed. And then as everything else, things got in the way. So I think that for the rest of the board, I think that's a positive, that may be a positive step for you guys to take. Okay. The daily bid. Julie, I know you asked the question, and because Jim's not here, we may not have all of the detail. If anybody is uncomfortable or feels we need to discuss this more, this doesn't have to be on our board agenda until June 22nd. Mary has some information and she'll go over. But if we need to meet again, we can certainly do that to make sure everybody has the ability to ask the questions they need to ask.
The daily bid was bid twice, as the board members know. The second time, we had the HVAC system altered in the design with the hope of reducing the cost. But in the interim, the pandemic came along and the cost for many other materials has gone up greatly. Overall, we were about $900,000 overbid. We did then have a meeting with the architect and the construction management team, Jim Restano and myself, and we looked at remaining projects, and there are still a number of them. In speaking with Jim, he felt that there were projects such as asphalt work that has to be done at Daly and at the administration building, some HVAC work and toilet rooms at Daly that could be done in the future as part of an annual budget rather than part of the bond, therefore freeing up some money, and overall found almost $500,000 doing that. The other large projects, however, that we feel that we really can't suggest cutting back in any way are the Sousa auditorium renovation and the air conditioning there, along with some electrical work that needs to be done, the Sousa addition of a STEAM classroom, the South Salem addition of an esteemed classroom, the HVAC and air conditioning work that's supposed to be done at Salem. There are some interior doors that need to be replaced at Weber, and there's a large electrical project that has to take place at Weber. So, and at Manor Haven, we do have the cafetorium, air conditioning, and some toilet rooms that need renovation there. So we are not speaking about touching any of those projects, but the ones that I did mention, the administration masonry and other masonry and terrazzo work at Guggenheim, we felt we could get about $529,000 from the bond to put towards that $900,000 deficit. Actually, the deficit must have been closer to $1 million, because doing all of that, we still have a shortage of $580,000. So my initial correspondence to the superintendent and the board was to make a decision to either put the daily project at the end of everything and see where it goes, excuse me, or what was not in that note, which I just briefly discussed with Dr. Hines prior to us going live stream, was that there is a possibility in the $3.5 million of federal money to use a portion of that for this construction, because it is for pre-K students who are our most vulnerable population. I did check with the state that that is a fair use of that money, and therefore this is something you had not heard before. But if the board wants to associate about $600,000 of that 3.5 million to that purpose, it could be done. But I know you need to have public discussion regarding the plan for the use of the federal monies, as well as the use of the additional state aid, the $1.5 million, for which Dr. Hines previously sent you a note. And I think that based on that, my suggestion to you is that you strongly consider using some of these federal monies, because otherwise, I don't see this happening for another couple of years. And I'll stop talking now and let Beth take over.
Thanks, Mary. Julie, are you here? Did you
I
leave?
am here. Do you
Oh,
see?
okay. I do. There you go. You went to a totally different spot. I had to look. It's so weird because in person, if we were sitting in a room, nobody would actually move. But on my screen, people move. It's a little weird. Since you're,
You
I'm
guys
gonna
should get rolling chairs so you can move.
I highly suggest that when you guys start your exec sessions in person again, that you give everybody a chair, and when they need to speak, they can line up and they can just rotate around the room. But go ahead, Julie.
The new take on musical chairs, right? Yes.
Right?
Yes. So, okay. So Mary, just on this last question about taking the money from the ARP, the 3.5 million. So it's in our role as the board to not approve necessarily how those monies are spent, right? Because the federal process is asking for other types of checks and balances. And it's not for us to if I'm understanding correctly, right? That it's not for us to approve yes or no how that money is spent from the federal standpoint, but we can utilize it and approve within the process and the projects that we're doing to offset costs. And that's how you're asking this question. Is that correct?
Yes, because as I said, you need to have public discussion, and therefore, if you want to include this in your public discussion, and that impacts on whether I award the contracts or do not award the contracts.
Perfect. This is also confusing and new for everyone. I wanted to also make sure I was well clear on all this. Okay, so that's great. And so I guess if we do if this second proposition or third proposition about taking the ARP funds and utilizing them, then what you're saying is if we move in that direction, we don't have to put the daily project on hold. And it appears, at least for right now, because I know not everything that is still out there has not all gone to bid yet, but it appears then we'll be able to continue moving forward with the projects as we have lined up, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
On both points.
Thank you.
Can I get a sense of everybody else of where, oh, sorry, Deborah. I don't know why I keep losing that top left corner of my computer.
It's okay. So if we use this money, first of all, I think it's very clever to be able to use this money if it gets approved. That's very helpful. But if we use money's not infinite. So if we use this money, is there something else in the district that might suffer where this money could have gone, should have gone, or will we not need this money anywhere else, I guess is my question.
Well, I can't answer that question totally because the funds are good until September 24, and there are always curricular needs. But I would say that it is the only way in which you would be able to move forward with the daily project.
If I could just, good afternoon, everyone. Just chime in here for a second. I think this is a really smart way to spend this money because we're looking at this capital project that, as Mary has pointed out, is going to benefit our pre-K students. And it's something that has to be done. It's also, as Mary pointed out, it's not a reoccurring cost, which is really important when we look at this type of money. You know, with what we are looking at adding as far as support staff over the next several years, where some of this money may go toward, right? We have to think about then after the timeline of this money running out, how we plan to pay for that. So this is a smart way, I think, of using this money. And at this point, I certainly wouldn't recommend, you know, I guess, working on this gap any other way, because the reality is that this is the amount of money that we need in order to move this forward. And we've already postponed it. And the longer we do postpone it, we know the cost will continue to go up. So, you know, again, I'd like to discuss this in public, not at our upcoming June meeting, but at our second June meeting. We will certainly make sure the public can be part of that conversation.
Larry?
My question is sort of one of timing. I suppose for the federal money, we have to lay it out before we can get it back and then we get reimbursed. Is that correct, Mary?
It has not been made clear yet. They said some districts will have to lay out money in advance, others won't, but they haven't clarified which districts those might be.
So if we're in the having to lay it out category, I guess the district would have to go into reserves to cover that and then get reimbursed the following year, or I mean, how would that play out? Or would we use the bond money and then reimburse the bond and then reuse the bond? I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out the you know, the logistics of it are a little complicated.
Right, it would all depend on how quickly the paperwork was processed. If we were still in the process of doing projects, we could borrow against other bonded items that haven't been bid yet. However, if everything has been bid and we're paying all those contractors, then we would have to borrow from fund balance and get reimbursed.
Or could something like that get added into the TANs or the bands or anything like that? Because it would probably be relatively short term.
You can't do it TAN because it's not tax money, it's extra federal money. And you couldn't do ban because it would exceed what the total amount of the bond was.
Okay, well, I tried.
Yes, you did.
Anyone else have anything? Does my sense of this is perhaps we should schedule, do you want to hold this for a general board meeting discussion? Or should we schedule a meeting to discuss this in particular prior to the June 22nd meeting? Because we have to approve those construction bids on June 22nd, one way or the other. What's everyone else's sense? Do we need to have a budget and facilities discussion before that June 22nd public meeting so that we at least know what's going on the agenda as far as approvals? What do you think, Mary?
Well, in terms of the process, I don't know how much more will be clear relative to whether we're going to be a reimbursable district or a paid in advance. We're all subject to putting in federal documentation by July 1st. So I do have to submit a form which will be for the full $3.5 million one way or another that can be amended. My thought would be to, well, you really are truly committed, however, once you approve the bid, which you have to do by the 22nd. I think you have all the facts at this time that I'll be able to provide to you. You just have to decide if you feel comfortable expending $600,000 of the 3.5 in that manner.
So how many people here sitting here are comfortable saying yes to that right now? Because if that's not the case, then we will have to have another meeting to discuss. Larry? Is everybody comfortable saying yes to that now?
I am.
Yep, good.
Rachel,
I'm
Deb,
not a- Yes.
Rachel?
I'm okay if everybody else is okay. I kind of liked your idea of putting it on for the general board meeting, just because I know
It's still going to be on as a discussion item, Rachel. My question is, it will be on as a discussion item, but we also have to have an agenda item to vote on the bid. And if we're not going to vote on the bid, we have to we have to either approve or reject the bids. And so I don't want to move.
So I
forward.
understand, I understand we have a time element, but as I understand it, we have until the 22nd to approve or reject the bid. So the only concern I'm raising is that because this wasn't on the agenda for today, I don't love that. I wish that we had.
We will
noticed
still
it.
we can still discuss this. So the only reason why it wasn't on the agenda is because Julie brought it up and Mary.
No, I know,
Right,
for good
so-
reasons, and things
Right.
come up, but it's a lot of money.
It's,
So-
so my point being, do we need, I'm trying to
I'm
decide if we need
confused.
another
What's a
budget and
lot of
facilities
money?
meeting.
I'm confused what Rachel's talking about. What's a lot of money?
The $3.5 million.
$3.5 million of federal money, which is a discussion item on June 22nd. I'm confused.
Go ahead.
I don't think your tone is necessary,
No, I'm
Emily. My only
confused. Help
point
me with my
is that this
confusion.
hasn't been noticed for this
This
specific
is a
thing.
work
hasn't
session
been-
of the board.
Okay,
So what-
okay.
What is the?
Let me, no. Let me take this back, Rachel. 3.5, we're not discussing.
If everybody,
Okay.
listen, if everybody.
No. Can I just speak? I just want to be clear. We're talking about using 600,000 of the 3.5 million for this. We're not talking about the full 3.5 million. That will be on the agenda to discuss, but I don't want these bids on the agenda. I don't want to walk into the agenda without having a sense that the board is ready to approve those or not, those bids. So if we need to have another budget and facilities meeting to discuss this, I need to know if that's something I need to calendar.
So here was the only thing I was going to say. I understand that we're not talking about using the entire 3.5 million. It concerns me that we raised this and, you know, it wasn't on the agenda, but I don't think there is anything explicitly wrong with it. If everybody else is ready to move forward and we are going to have this discussion at a night meeting anyway, I'm okay with it. That is the entirety of the thing I was going to say from the beginning.
Okay, Deborah?
I don't have a problem discussing it. I think it's a great solution. The question I know that materials have gone up in price because of the pandemic. I know we don't, and they have gone up more than they may have otherwise, but there we are. And I know we want to get this construction work done, and I know we've been putting it off. I don't suppose anybody has a crystal ball. Does anybody have a sense as to whether material prices are going to continue to increase in the foreseeable future, such that it is necessary, such that these bids become, is there any chance to revise these bids? I think I asked that when we were discussing.
Deborah, yeah, my understanding, to be honest, and obviously this is, sort of not a professional assessment, but my understanding from the feeling of people out there in the construction world is, and this isn't just construction, right? This is cars. This is almost anything you're looking to buy right now. So many factories were converted to make things like PPE and ventilators and other things. And so many of the resources were explicitly going to those, and those factories have not been converted back. They are still making those products. They have to continue that under whatever federal program they're doing that under. And so they believe it will take 3 to 4 years for this to level out, and it probably won't come down. It will probably just stop. It will just level out. But it is a significant issue that we're going to all be dealing with as a result of this changeover of all those factories. So that, and again, I'm telling you, like, this is my reading of, my own research for things that I was looking to do for myself. I'm not, purporting to be an expert here, but that's my understanding. Nora was next.
Yeah, I was going to say something to the effect that Beth said about the prospects for the prices going down. in the immediate future or the near future aren't so good, although I didn't have the actual time frame, but after talking to people who are doing construction and building, the same thing. And then I just wanted to say regarding the fact that we are discussing this now and it wasn't on the agenda. I don't know if this is even feasible, but I did notice that there's only 3 people from the community watching right now. So now there's down to, well, so before a few minutes ago, there were 3, now we're down to 1. So I do assume there's going to be people who are, if anybody's live streaming it now, they're watching it live stream, but if it's going to be posted, maybe we could amend the agenda to reflect that this was discussed, because I don't know if anybody does it, but perhaps if anybody looks at an agenda for what was discussed at a budget meeting and then decides whether or not to watch that recording, you can potentially add to the budget meeting that this was also discussed, and they could, then they could determine whether or not they wanted to watch the recording. Because right now there's only one person in the public watching on the, what are we using here? Is this a Google Meet or a Zoom? I forget.
There's only one participant. That doesn't mean there's only one person watching. They could be watching on YouTube and not participating, but
No, I understand that.
we're on Zoom.
There were 3 people, there were 3 people on YouTube when I looked.
There you go.
How many?
3.
3.
On YouTube.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, so people that maybe are working or whatever that would watch it later, we could give them notice that way that it was.
And I think that happens more frequently with our committee meetings, that people actually watch them later because they're during the
Yeah,
work
so I'm just
stuff.
saying, add to the agenda so people have, have notice.
Emily?
I just wanted to, I put it in the chat. So Mary, remind me please, and Mike, the $3.5 million, which is the American Rescue Plan dollars, it is not for board to approve, correct? It is the process that I, at least I've understood, is that it is to be presented to the state and there is a discussion about it in public, but it is not money that has to be approved by the board. So if the superintendent wanted to include in his presentation of the 3.5 million, which the board does know that it is an agenda item on June 22nd, which is why we added the June 22nd meeting. He can present it and the board can just be notified of it, but it's not so much the way we would do like a budget process where the board has to vote, yes, we approve this $167 million budget. So process wise, am I correct in that, Mary?
Yes, you
Okay.
are.
Thank you. That's what I just wanted to make sure that I had that correct. Thank you.
Rachel?
I'm glad that Deborah brought out this point of the construction costs, but I just wanted to note, I think to me, the weighing is a little different than if we were an individual person deciding if we're redoing our kitchen or not. And because we have, if we knew the prices were going to go down for sure. And by the way, I don't think Deborah's arguing for this, so I'm not trying to disagree with you, Deborah. I know you were just asking for informational purposes, and I have a feeling you're thinking the same thing. If we thought for sure they were going to go down, it'd be worth waiting. But if we don't know, I think there are many moments where we're a school district and we just have to pay what we have to pay if we think a goal is important. And the community has bought into this work and has been waiting on it for a while. So I like the idea of pushing forward. Just to make sure I'm clear on this, and I think I am, I think Dr. Hines and Mrs. Callahan, you were both wholeheartedly in favor of this plan as well. And in that case, I also just defer to your judgment, to both of you, on the fact that this is the right and appropriate way to proceed.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to add? No? Okay. If for some reason we feel we need to schedule another meeting before the end of the year, we will do that. Otherwise, this may be our last meeting for the end of the year. So I just personally would like to thank Mary for her many years of service. The Budget and Facilities Committee will not be the same without you, for sure. We will miss you and we hope you enjoy your retirement.
Thank you. Well, I would also like to wish our outgoing board members, who have always added much good thought and consideration to all of these issues, the very best. You've been very spot on in all of your questioning relative to budget and facilities, as well as in other areas. But you've always been great committees for me to work with. And I really wish you all the very best. So thank you for your service to the district as well.
Thank you, Mary. Nora?
Thank you. I just also wanted to thank Mary for her years of service and for, making the budget relatively easy to understand. And thank you for everything that you've done. And also thank Beth for her years of service as the board chair, because you've been an excellent board chair, and appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, everybody, let me just make sure the one person attending doesn't have any questions. Do we have any questions from the public? If so, just raise your hand and we can unmute you. Okay. I thank everybody, and I will see you all on June 8th. Bye.
Nora,
Bye.
before we leave,
Thank you, Beth.
Deborah, go ahead.
Oh,
before we leave, was there any,
motion? Any motions we want to make in case anybody feels a motion?
Oh.
Well, Deborah, couldn't you do that? You're a board member.
I can make it, but Deb, you're welcome to do it as well.
No, no,
Okay.
I just,
I would like to make a motion for the board to go into executive session. Do I have a second?
second, and the purpose,
Oh, thank you. For the purpose of discussing a personnel matter. Do I have a second?
I think Julie seconded.
Okay, everybody in favor? I don't know if Mary's supposed to do this, but everybody in favor?
Deborah's hand is raised.
Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you, Deb, Rachel.
Thank you, and thank you, Mary.
So is the public off, or are you going?
I think we're gonna go to a different place.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Gonna miss you. But we are gonna have a drink, right?
Yeah,
At
definitely.
least one. I say drink, that's a euphemism. Drinks. Open mic. Okay, talk to you later.